Welcome to another Thursday night of the Paranormal Council. And I am so excited because tonight we are going to be talking about parsimony. And no, that's not when you get taken to court for some kind of payments to your ex. This is going to be, if for those of you not familiar with parsimony, think of Occam's razor as also as what is maybe known as. But the best way to explain it is it's like when you're trying to come up with the simplest solution, right? When you are trying to figure out something, the most simplest explanation is probably that. Okay? So that's parsimony in a nutshell. And we are going to talk about how that relates to paranormal investigating and whether there's enough parsimony or whether there's a lack thereof. Okay? So, Andrea, you are on time. That is good. That is good. All right. So let's get started with the show, guys. And remember, you're gonna want to stay tuned to the end because we always pivot to other little fun little subjects sometimes, or we have some information all the way to the end. So, guys, let's get started. So, who wants to jump in on this one first? Parsimony.
Well, we can talk about all the different definitions of it if you want.
Sure.
I mean, a lot of people don't know what that is, and you're right, it's not court fees for things.
That's what it's like. It's almost like another level of like you start with matrimony, then you go to alimony, and then there's like a level after that, parsimony. That's what it seems like to me. But anyway,
well, I mean that can fit the definition. You know, when you're getting stingy and hiding resources and keeping things small, right?
Yeah, think of the archetype of Mr. Burns in The Simpsons. That's the parsimony, where he doesn't want to spend any money on anything, but he's got a giant pile of it somewhere. You know?
Right.
But it's the Scrooge.
Right.
So my question is how is parsimony like? How is that related to paranormal investigations? Let's bring it home for the folks watching, and they say, well, look, how does this connect? Like, how can we think of parsimony and investigating?
Well, so I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it because it kind of depends on how your team functions and what your goals are with your investigation. Like, there's one approach to look at things scientifically. There's another approach to look at things like psychologically, right? And or spiritually. And they're all kind of similar, but they're also kind of different as well, right? It's not just about keeping things small, but I mean, the overall gist of it is the idea of looking for the simplest answer because it's usually the right answer, right? And even if it isn't the right answer, it at least points you in the right direction, so to speak. That's the whole concept of it, the whole idea behind it, so to speak. Like in an investigative setting from a scientific point of view, obviously you want to just make sure that, you know, your scientific method as you're doing it in your investigation, you don't want to clutter up the evidence, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Sometimes teams want to keep it small with just a couple pieces of equipment, but that are still, you know, going to catch evidence from a different standpoint. But at the same time, sometimes too much can cause interference, or using it incorrectly can cause interference. Right? So there's different ways to approach investigating with the idea of parsimony in mind. And, you know, like our title, parsimony or lack thereof, how many teams are not utilizing that in their strategies, in their investigations?
Yeah, I think maybe you might be referring to like maybe sometimes teams can overcomplicate.
And there he goes.
Did he boot himself out? That's
Probably.
funny.
Yeah. Well, playing devil's advocate on the parsimony.
I guess I dropped out there.
Yeah, playing devil's advocate on it. In science, they use parsimony quite a bit, to try to figure out what is going on, which the most obvious answer, the simplest answer to a scientific assessment is A. It's this. The problem is when they're dealing with complex issues like the totality of the universe, or even space-time and all of these kinds of things, if they're using one form of measurement to determine something, it's almost always wrong. Always. They decided a long time ago, well, not long, but decades ago, that the age of the universe was 13 billion years old. Why? Because the farthest thing they've ever been able to see with anything has been 13 billion light years. That was the edge of the universe as far as they were concerned. That's how old the universe was, because that's as far as they could see. And that same philosophy that they used when the earth was flat was the same measurement that they would use. They would look at the world is flat. As far as I can see, there is only so far that I can see, so obviously everything is flat. That was the thinking back then, and science still kind of does that with single unit or single measurement scientific theses. The age of the universe being one, dark matter being another, dark energy. They determined that dark matter existed because they figured out the total amount of mass that was in the universe, and their numbers came out wrong. They couldn't get the numbers to balance out right. So basically, the rounding error of 80% of the mass of the universe, they don't know what it is or where it is or how it actually exists. So they just put a little post-it note on that, and we're going to call that dark matter. The math didn't come out right on someone's whiteboard, so they invented a whole new species of matter to cover their bases. That parsimony, or whatever we're calling it, is always going to be basically found and be debunked in the future, because it's a single measurement that they're using. Even when they just figure out how far something is away, they really don't know. They're guessing based off of light waves, the drift of the universe, and all this other kind of stuff. The red shift is what they call it. That's how they figure out how far something is away, but they really don't know. So they try and use another system called parallax, which is basically take the same measurement twice, 6 months apart, because we're on opposite sides of the sun, 6 months apart from each other. And it's kind of like when you look in one eye and then you go to the other eye and you hold your finger out in front, the finger moves, That's parallax. I know, it's kind of stupid, but they figure out.
I want to see you do it again.
That's how they, figure it out with the finger, but that only works up to 7 light years away. After that whole parallax aspect doesn't actually gauge how far something is away. So when you're talking about billions of light years away or billions of years away, they still don't know. They don't have an accurate way of figuring it out. And the new satellite that went up, the Webb satellite, found whole galaxies were existing that shouldn't exist beyond the birth of the universe, 13 billion light years away. It was 18 and 24 billion light years away. They're finding whole galaxies that shouldn't exist because the one measurement that they were using to determine the age of the universe was flawed. It was a single measurement. And now to translate that to paranormal, if you're only going to use an EF meter to determine what's going on, chances are you're not going to hit it. because you're only using a single measurement, and a flawed one at that. You have to be able to have several different things going on to trust but verify.
Yeah, I'm really curious since we're just kind of talking about space real quick. I'm kind of excited to see some of the results of that LSST camera in Chile. Have you heard about that?
No.
It's the largest. I think it's like Legacy Survey of Space and Time, but it's like the largest. Basically, it's like the largest digital camera ever. It's like 6,000 pounds and like all the shit. But anyways, it can like photograph the night sky, like all the stars, like the entire. I think it's like 3 days. They can take a picture of the thing, but their goal, I think they've been in operation for a year now. They're taking pictures of space basically over the next 10 years. So that way they can literally compare the night sky over the next 10 years, because as you know, like you had to always pick like certain points in space and try to like see, are they moving? But this time lapse is going to give us like objects that we're going to say, oh, look at all the different objects that are actually moving, the ones that are, so it's going to give us this whole time. It's really cool. Like, so look into it. It's the LSST in Chile. And check that out, because that's pretty interesting. I was looking at that. I think they showed a few time-lapse photos just in the recent stuff, but I think that's really cool, especially for tracking like the different asteroids and comets and stuff that they're trying to do. So I'm pretty excited to see about that, since you were talking about space stuff. A little bit of nerd stuff I like every once in a while. I try to learn a little bit about some of that stuff.
Well, they're finding that some stars blink in and out of existence, just randomly. They don't explode. They don't. They're not born. They just blink and they're gone, and then they come back. It's not like the atmosphere, where the atmosphere is playing with the light. This is like, the James Webb satellite. It's nowhere near any kind of atmosphere, and it is pointed in one direction, and they'll see a star, and then the star will disappear, and then it'll come back in another galaxy. It's not in our group. It's in another galaxy somewhere. But they're looking at a star, and it's just gone, and then it comes back, and they don't know what's going on to make stars do that.
I don't know, like an object that is like, I don't know, billions of light years away. You think maybe something could have blocked the light for a little bit? Maybe, I don't know. I mean, like, I'm just saying.
I mean, it could be the cloaks from the disappearing cloaks from Harry Potter.
Right.
Well, it doesn't respond to the normal stuff that they would expect, and that's usually the first thing they pull out. There's something moved in front, like a rogue planet or a dust cloud or something like that, but that also gives off a signal in the infrared, because that's what James Webb is. It looks in the infrared. So something is not giving off anything and pulling out in front of it. Even a black hole would create a lensing effect, but it doesn't do that either. So there's a lot of stuff that is being seen through James Webb now that is really spooky to a lot of these astrophysicists, because it rewrites everything, the assumptions that they were taught. So.
All right, so let's kind of start reeling it back into paranormal, because I know like there's some people out there that may not be into the space stuff like we are. I think it's really cool, but trust me, I could just, that'd be an episode, but it wouldn't be paranormal, right? All right, so
but that was just my devil's advocate. The whole idea of the simplest thing is usually correct, but it really depends on your unit of measurement, the way you're going about it. Sometimes you need multiple verification equipment, psychics, whatever, independently, on something. And at that point, you can say, okay, what is the most obvious, evidence on this?
Right. And like I want, since I got cut out by my own whatever happened, I was gonna say, sometimes like in paranormal investigating, you always have to keep that in mind, right? Sometimes we can overcomplicate things. It's like, oh my god, the TV's not working. Like, oh my god, like I don't know what's going on. The remote's not doing nothing. Like, oh my god, well maybe something happened. There was like some kind of EMF purge, and now the TV's not working, and this and that, and blah blah blah. It's like, hey, did you see if it was plugged in? Okay, might have got
Maybe
unplugged.
the dog tripped over the cord.
Yeah, like it could have just got unplugged. Oh look, it's unplugged. So and like I said, in the world of paranormal investigating, sometimes we get thinking about these overcomplicated things, or what something could be like. Oh, maybe it's a spirit that, blah blah blah, and like it's been known to do these things, and like it. So maybe it's like knocking on the walls because it's angry about this. And it's like, or maybe just the walls are creaking a little bit because it's an old ass house. Okay, so there is sometimes a very simple explanation, and it's not always paranormal.
Well, so
Yeah.
I think this kind of really ties into conversations we've had on here before, right? We have talked about pareidolia, we've talked about confirmation bias, right? And when you go into an investigation expecting an outcome, confirmation bias kicks in. Start seeing things that aren't there. You start seeing or thinking things that are not, because you already are wanting or thinking you're going to get some type of reaction, right? Like, you keep thinking about all this, makes me think about kind of the conversation, Josh, that you and I had when we were investigating at the Ditto House. And we heard steps come across another room, and there was a light, and it looked like somebody was walking with a flashlight, plain as day. Josh and I both saw it. We totally thought somebody was walking across to go in the bathroom. And then we realized all of a sudden that it just stopped. No bathroom door open, no bathroom door closed. Old house, should be creaking, should be hearing creaking besides footsteps. Light disappeared, but there wasn't any like reflection through a doorway, like a crack in a door, nothing.
And we could see down the hall, and nobody came out that room.
Yeah, we didn't see anybody come out that room. We were only, 8-9 feet away, if that?
Yeah.
Something like that. So we should have seen the person as they came through, because we weren't in the complete dark where we were. But nothing. We sit there looking at each other, and it never leaves. So we get up to go investigate because we're sure there is a person there. Absolutely 100% sure. Turns out nobody was upstairs with us at all. So we couldn't explain it, right? But in a situation like that, so many people would have had so many different explanations, because they went in there with expectations, just like we had expectations of, oh, we heard a sound, this is what it is. But it wasn't, right? So when people hear a knocking and they go, oh, a ghost is knocking, is it? Or is it just something else?
Yeah.
Right? So that's where confirmation bias can really get investigators and investigations in trouble, and being fully aware of it and how it works and how much it does affect you on so many levels.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like I said, there's times when it can be both ways. Like, you literally, like in that situation, when we saw that light, for us, like Occam's razor suggested that it's just a person. It's like one of the other investigators. We know that the one guy that was also investigating there that night, he came up and joined us, earlier that night. So we thought maybe it was him. It was like so simple. We just thought, hey, it's somebody's flashlight. They're getting ready to come out the the door there, use the restroom, whatever, or just come out, who knows. But when there was really no sound and then the light went out and we didn't hear anything and they didn't come out of the room, now all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, the simplest explanation actually wasn't the thing. Let's go investigate. And so we actually had to go and investigate and then start to work backwards from there and say, well, it wasn't the simple thing. And so now we have to look and go, there's only one window in this room and it's not facing the street. And the curtains were closed, and they're even kind of like those blackout type curtains, so it wouldn't be like a car light. It wasn't even the type of car light you see when it goes through a house. It was like a blue LED kind of flashlight type thing that was moving just like a flashlight. And anyways, so we just had to start debunking shit, but it's like, and nobody was up there, and but like I said, you try to find the simplest explanation. You do. And when you can't, then you got to start going down the list.
I mean, that may have been a bad example because we were literally there to experience the paranormal and thought we were experiencing people, and it turned out we were maybe people from the other side,
But I mean, it is a good example because, again, it's also when you assume things too sometimes, or when and so for us, we legitimately was kind of utilizing like a simple explanation. But when it didn't follow through, now all of a sudden it was like, oh, okay. But yeah, I mean, like in when it comes to maybe like the paranormal instances that happen or what people think is paranormal, could easily be explained sometimes.
Right.
Well, I mean, that's the best kind, because your assumption going in is there's nothing, and then that assumption's shot down. It's the worldview paradigm that you work with on a daily basis is mundane, and going into an investigation in that mindset of the mundane can actually be the most exciting when real stuff actually starts to happen, because you're not influenced by your own biases. You're not influenced by, your front-loaded information. You're
right.
Going in thinking that this is just a thing, it's a normal, everyday, house, maybe, whatever. And next thing you know, you're like, whoa, hey, that's not normal. It's outside the paradigm, which that's the best. That's the best kind of investigation to have.
Yeah, I think the mindset for most investigators, period, should be, one, you should go in with as much open mind as you can. Try not to be, even if you like we talked about confirmation bias, right? If you do happen to hear about, because sometimes you hear things, you see things, you can't always prevent it, right? So sometimes you might hear about a location, you might hear people you might walk in on a conversation and they're like, dude, did you see that ghost named John that was talking to us through the spirit box at the Ditto House or whatever? And you're gonna be like, oh shit. And then like the next time you go to the Ditto House or whatever, you might expect a ghost named John. But if you can go into an investigation as open-minded as possible, right? You want to pretty much say, you know what? I don't care if there's a John. I don't care if there's whatever. I just want to go in and see what I find out. Where does the evidence take me? And also, if you utilize sort of that parsimony, like Occam's razor type theories, where you're like, I'm going to try to find the simplest solution or the simplest explanations I can for each event that occurs. I think that's a good mindset to have, because you're open-minded and you're going to try to get to the simplest solutions, which is usually going to help debunk many things. And then if you have a problem and it doesn't fit the easiest thing, you go to the next step and you start widening those options.
Yeah, well,
yeah, and I think go ahead, Stacey.
Yeah, I was just going to say on the communication level, I keep mispronouncing the word, the Occam's razor aspect. When you're communicating with a spirit, especially over like, these devices like a spirit box or the what's the one with the headphones and their Estes, you're going through these channels so quickly you only get like one or two words in whatever communication is going on. The spirit may not have said, "My name is John," or people ask, "What's your name?" and it said John. It may not have said John. It may have said, "I'm in the John, leave me alone." But you only caught the word John, and that's what his name was. So, I mean, you kind of have to use a little bit of skepticism, too, when they start naming off their own name, because you're only catching a fragment of something that they're saying on these.
So what you're saying is if I hear the word John, the simplest explanation is he's in the John.
He's in the John.
His name.
Yeah. You need to run up to the bathroom and start getting an EVP,
That sounds more like a longer theory than that his name is John, but yes. I know what you mean.
So we should take AI and we should put it in our spirit boxes so they can be more like Bumblebee from the Transformers movie and switch through the channels fast enough to get the next word in the sentence. Is that what we're saying?
Okay. Or either that or it actually stitches them together so it actually makes more sense.
This is why I'm not a big spirit box person, because I don't know. It's these phonetic words that are supposed to be, in theory, put together, and then I don't know if it's truly. I have heard some pretty long sentences occasionally in those scans, and that's kind of impressive when it's going through the different stuff, but it seems more rare, and it's like when I hear these phonetic words and they're jammed together, I don't know. I'm not always impressed by that, but
Well, I've heard better stuff come out of an EVP than through a spirit box or all of that. I'm personally fond of 1 for yes, 2 for no on either lights or a dead bell. Those are, to me, are more accurate because you're asking binary questions and getting a binary answer. You're not trying to pull some crazy theory out of your own head of whatever it is that they're trying to communicate. If you're going to use equipment, the binary yes no is far more powerful, far more accurate.
Like the Epoch box, like the Epic box from Ghost Gear by my buddy Rob. It's yes no, different Rob than Get Haunted. But hi to Rob from Get Haunted too. Anyways, no, since I brought him up too, like I gotta say hi to him though. But no, you're right though. I do. That's why I like the Epic box. It's like yes no, and we had pretty good success with it. I think even Jen and I, when we were in the church, using the Epic box in the background, we were doing different sessions and asking questions, and it seemed pretty responsive at times. Fairly almost intelligent with some of the questions we were asking, and so I do like those preferably a lot more than spirit boxes. I tend to stay away from those as much. Like the Estes method is okay, but here's my problem. Okay, so how many times have you watched a team or somebody doing an Estes method, and it seems like the whoever's in the sensory deprivation, it seems like they're the ones driving the conversation when it should be the other way around. So when the person's asking a question like, "Hey, can you tell us your name?" and then they're in there like, "Doorway." Well, then now you got the guy asking the questions going, door, are you in the doorway? And then they're like, "Carburetor." And then they're like, "Oh, so you want to drive your car? You want to work on it? Is there something wrong with your carburetor? Is it flooded?" And they're just like, "Milk." You're like, "Oh, you like milk, huh? So you want some milk?" And it's like, It's frustrating because it's like the person that's supposed to be answering the questions, or like sometimes they won't say nothing and then they'll ask a question. They'll be like, okay, well, hey, can you tell us your name or whatever? And then they'll like say tree or something. They're like, oh, where's the tree? Are you near the tree? It's like it's frustrating because I don't know if that's true science, right? It's like because the person that's supposed to be answering is leading the conversation technically now.
Well, see, and that's one of the things I was just going to bring up. You're like totally walking right into it. So,
we did not coordinate this.
We don't ever do this. So with the parsimony, right? The biggest thing in like when you're going into an investigation is figuring out how to not only remove confirmation bias, but to remove assumptions. And not just, the way we think about confirmation bias, right? We assume certain things about our gear. We assume certain things about the placement of our gear. We assume things about the batteries in the gear. We assume that the past activity is going to resurface this time. We assume that because somebody else heard John, we're going to hear John, right? And that kind of creates that confirmation bias as well. But the thing is, it's like with science, you want to find the most observable evidence and the observable data so that not only can you measure it, but you can record it and you can compare it and all those things. But that's another side on that is that's where we have a lot of problems with working with psychics or mediums, whatever they want to be called, in paranormal, right? Because how do you observe what they just heard? They're telling you, oh, I just heard this. Well, how do you document that? Besides saying this is what they said. That's a first person account. So it really isn't any different in a lot of ways than a spirit box. Right?
True, unless you quarantine the psychic.
Yes.
Where the psychic actually has a voice recorder where they're talking about what they're seeing, they're feeling, they're sensing, all of it in a quarantine environment, where you can actually bring that back to the table with evidence saying this is what was going on while everything else was going on, and it corresponds with A, B, C, and D, or doesn't. It's completely out of the blue. It doesn't correspond with anything. You can take it off the table. That's one way of doing it.
Yeah, that is one way. That's a good way to do it. And I think more teams should do that if they have somebody on the team. And also very much understanding that the little tiny things that you say before going somewhere actually do affect it. So when we say quarantining, we mean quarantining from get-go. There's little hints and little leading things and things like that. But, I started doing this last year a double Estes, so to speak, where we were completely separated. Whoever was under Estes was completely separated, and I went to another space. And we made it so that there was one person in the middle who could hear the responses while we were recording it. And so the person in the middle was also asking questions, but could hear both responses from both ends, and then comparing the information. And more than once doing this, multiple times actually, we've had basically ongoing conversations between what I was hearing and what they were saying from Estes, which of course came through the spirit box. And it was literally like watching a back and forth conversation. So that's kind of like quarantine, but not quite the same, if that makes sense. But it is another way to kind of help turn that part of it into more data while utilizing those other tools.
I have a question for you. You've done a lot of residentials. Residential situations are investigated completely different than, say, Ditto House. That's more of a public environment and public forum kind of thing. Someone's home that they're actively living in is a different environment, and how you walk into it and how you deal with that situation or whatever the situation they're dealing with. Whether you need to, debunk things right away, or whether you just need to perceive. When you walk into a home, what's the first thing that you do? Interview the client? Is it walk the property? Is it, what do you do first when you go to a resident?
As an investigator for that
Yeah,
residence, or
you go in
Well,
to investigate, to deal with. They say they have a haunting and they're freaked out and they're all emotionally, a dumpster fire because they think they've got a demon running around their house. You're there
right?
not only to resolve the situation, but determine whether or not A, it's true, B, whether or not there's any kind of spirit activity at all, and or C, debunk everything top to bottom. You
Hmm.
really have to go into a situation rolling the dice. What's the first
well,
thing?
look, your first two things you have. Okay, so with residential versus just going and having fun at investigating ditto or whatever, like some house or like a location, you can
Yeah,
approach similar because you have similar, like you're used to doing things in a similar pattern, so you will do things similar. But in a residential, okay, you're going to follow a lot more of that 7-step scientific procedure. And what's the first 2 steps of the scientific uh, process? And that's make an observation, right? That's the very first thing,
Mhm.
and ask a question, right? Well, in this case, your observation is going to be your initial contact with the client. All right, they're going to contact you. They're say, "Hey, I've got a problem," whatever. You're going to start to observe the client. You're also going to, again, go into that second part. You're going to start asking questions. You have to get all that information. And even Jen brought this up before, where a lot of teams don't ask enough of the right questions. Okay. So you got to gather all of that. That way you can move to the next thing, which is form your hypothesis, right? And then from there, what are you going to do? Now you're going to conduct your experiments. Okay. Now, this is where I think a lot of teams will follow the scientific process, but either they don't do certain steps enough, or where a lot of people differ is the step in conducting an experiment, right? That's where we tend to have a lot of disagreements of, what's the right way to conduct the experiments scientifically. But then, of course, you analyze your data. Then once you analyze all your data, like that's basically evidence review, all the, you look over everything, the questions that you asked your clients, and then you draw your conclusion, right? And then you communicate the results, and that's when you go to your clients and you're able to approach them. And the more information you have, the more you can educate your clients, and that's what's ultimately going to solve their issues or help them feel better or come up with another plan from there. But that's where you kind of go through that scientific process versus like the Ditto House or somewhere you're just going to kind of go there. You're going to conduct experiments. You might analyze the data and you might have some fun, but you're not going to stress about it because you're not really trying to solve a problem. You're not trying to really prove anything to anybody. So that's kind of a big difference.
Well, I got to jump in here for just a second because the Ditto House is a really bad example for this conversation because
I'm
it is actually a full-time residence. They live there, and every once in a while, they will allow investigators to come and investigate. But it is a private home. They don't just rent it out all the time. So that is not the best example for this conversation, but the concept still applies.
Waverly
Um,
Hills or something. It doesn't. You know.
yeah, or an old Civil War home that isn't occupied anymore is now more museum than anything. But there's a huge difference with residentials, and I think Stacy was kind of asking like, you're totally right as far as the scientific method goes. For me, it was really hard doing residential investigations. For those 25 years I was doing them solo because I used my abilities. I didn't use equipment. I only had me, myself, and I to be able to evaluate everything and to do any type of experiment, know what's going on, figure out how to handle it. I didn't own my first K2 until 2 years ago. Like, didn't have a spirit box until last year. Didn't have a REM pod until last year. Because there's lots of ways to investigate, right? But, you know, especially in those earlier years, there's a lot that goes into it because you do want to go into it unbiased. You do want to go into it a blank slate so that you're getting data, right? And in the situations that I most often worked was where there were a lot of things that were not right, and most of it was, there was of course debunking. There was some stuff that was just normal, but in most of the cases that I actually ended up going to, there were actual problems of some kind or another. And you know, with it just being me, I was first contact. I had to get the information, but I also had to consider things like I'm by myself, and at the time I was a young female, early 20s, you know, late teens. So I'm going by myself into strangers' homes at night. I need to be extra cautious. I need to do extra research. I need to have safety in mind at all times. So, you know, do it again. I'm just going to say it. Don't do residentials alone. It's just not a good idea. You learn the hard way quick. But for me, I had to learn very quickly to utilize my abilities to read while I was getting the information. So essentially, you know how you do like a pros cons sheet? You got the two sides with your line down the middle. Everything that people would tell me leading up to it, I was sorting it like this because I was hearing yes, no, yes, no. Mm-hmm. And so I would create two files. This is what I'm hearing is yes. This is what I'm hearing is no. Right? And I would try to focus on that. So when they would say, I don't know why I always feel funny in this room. Right? And at the time I was in the early days when I didn't really know how I was doing what I was doing and things like that. I always feel funny in this corner of this room. Right? Well, if I don't have an EMF detector and I don't know a whole lot about it, you have to be able to go, that's not paranormal right here. You have to be able to sort out the difference. You know, at the time I couldn't always tell them why. You know, and again, I'm talking 28, 29 years ago, right? Lots been learned since then, but couldn't always necessarily tell them why, but I could tell them positively, this is not paranormal. And, you know, I could say this is paranormal, or this is something that we have to deal with, or somebody's done something here they shouldn't have done. So it was a very different ball game all those years ago. Now, Josh and I were just talking about this. Ideally, I would never take a call from a client. I would never do interviews. I would never be involved. I wouldn't know any of the history. I wouldn't research the location. I would just be like, got a residential, cool. Now I'm going to go walk. I wouldn't even meet the clients first, if possible. I would just walk in their home.
Right.
You know, because that's the best way to get the most unclouded information.
Yeah. Now, one thing I want to get into real quick as we get to the back side of this is I want to discuss, so utilizing parsimony in an investigation, right? Does that mean that the simplest answer is the right answer? And how can you know when what's a method you could do to sort of make sure that you are trying to get the right answer, I guess?
Well, Sherlock Holmes said it. Once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, is the truth.
Okay. Well, let me put this out here too. So let's just say, let's look at some scenario, right? So you're in a house as an investigator. You're walking through, and let's just say you have an EMF meter, right? That's pretty common. Okay, you're walking through, and your EMF meter goes off. Hey, Raven. Your
Raven had to
EMF.
say hi.
Let's say your EMF meter goes off, right? And so, first of all, what would that tell you, right? What can you draw from your EMF meter just going off? Okay, you move it around. There's nothing above you, nothing below you, just one spot, and it's pegging up there pretty good. What does that tell you, right? What's maybe Occam's razor, whatever, how you want to look at it, parsimony. What does that tell you?
There's a wiring issue in the floor, or in the ceiling, or in the light fixture that's right above your head. It's
Okay.
bad wiring that is sending off an unusual amount of EMF.
Okay, so I mean, there's no right or wrong. I'm just, Jen, would you agree with that maybe, or do you have something else you wanted to add? That
Yeah, I
EMF?
mean, where there's, unshielded wires in the walls can create static or let off static that can set them off too. That happened to us a bunch of times.
Okay,
Very true.
now, let's go to the same scenario. You're walking through, EMF goes off. Okay, same thing. You're like one little spot, but there's another device on the floor, and it beeps because it dropped 3 degrees in temperature at the same time that your EMF went off. Now what? Now what do you think? You have a cold spot or a cold drop in temperature, at least 3 degrees, which is not normal for a heat rise situation, and your EMF just went off and started spiking all at the same time. So what does that tell you now?
I have a question. Was somebody smart enough to hit the breaker and shut the power off to the house first, or no?
I mean, let's say the power's on. A lot of people don't always want their power off at a residential home, right? So let's just assume the power's on. So now look, there's no right or wrong. I don't want to put you guys on a spot. Okay.
Well, you
now,
look for air conditioning, because you're talking about ventilation that's going on, the temperature drop. You got time of day. If you're in the middle of the night, the temperature is pretty much going to be ambient. But if you're talking about right around dusk, where the temperature quickly drops, you're going to have ambient temperatures drop at that same time too. So,
right, but ambient temperatures usually won't drop more than 3 degrees in one setting. That's why we kind of look at a +2 or more, really. Like if you're over +2 degrees, usually like +3. As an investigator, it's usually a sudden drop for some reason more than just ambient drop, because you will get ambient drops and even air conditioning, but it'll start to affect in a different drop pattern. Okay, so I don't want to get off on the weeds. So let's look at the scenario again. We go in, EMF goes off again, your temperature drops, and you have a REM pod over here that goes off. Okay, now there's no answer. I'm not hitting you guys up. I'm gonna do one more. Fourth scenario. You walk in, your EMF goes off, your REM pod goes, your temperature beep, goes off, and then you check the footage later, and there's an eerily kind of ghost mist passing through. Okay, my point is in those situations, yes, you can possibly utilize Occam's razor or parsimony, if you will. What's the simple solution? However, what's great about this is because you decided to utilize multiple pieces of equipment, now you can actually say, hey, this is possibly a phenomenon because we have a mist on camera, we have motion, we have temperature drop, and we have electromagnetic field all went off in this moment with some kind of phenomenon that just happened. Right? You still may not say 100% that it's a ghost or paranormal, but versus if you just had that EMF go off, it's easy to go with the most logical, simple solution. Oh, probably some wiring, whatever. I mean, or Wi-Fi, right? Things like that, a walkie-talkie or cordless phone or something. Who knows? It's like simple. But the more equipment you utilize as an investigator, if you have all that, it's called cross-validation, right? Now you can say, okay, The EMF went off, but we also had these other multiple devices all go off at the same time, which is not normal for a situation in a home. You see what I'm saying? So I just wanted to throw that out there to you guys.
Preponderance of evidence. In a court of law, 3 different devices measuring the same thing, producing the same result independently, is considered to be valid evidence.
Right.
It's actually considered to be empirical fact in a court of law. Now, scientific is a little bit more, because in court you only need to be 51% right. In science they want you to be closer to the 98, 99% right.
Well, they want to be able to recreate it over and over too. That's the problem. And you can't recreate paranormal over and over.
Well, they're coming off of that too, because they're noticing as they get into, like we talked about, space. There's some things in space you can't recreate. What you can do is you can capture and try and explain through astrophysics what just took place, but at the same time they can't recreate it. They have to find something else exactly the same somewhere in that big ass sky in order to say, yeah, that's what took place. But the recreating thing in science is becoming, they're trying to walk that back a little bit. That's
when it's convenient, and then when it's not convenient for them, they're like, no, we want you to recreate it. But then when it's convenient for them. But but like Jen, I just wanted to say too real quick, like, when you investigate solo, like, it's not always a question of your abilities, because like, when you're somebody like yourself and you have abilities and you can do these things, the reality, unfortunately, the sad thing is nowadays the modern clients, because of the TV shows, because of YouTube, they want to see, like, they want to see meters, they want to see shit going off, and they want to see that evidence. They don't want somebody that's going to come in anymore with their feelings and their abilities just to tell them, hey, look, I'm telling you that what you're feeling this because blah blah blah, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and that's the sad thing about the reality, is like, you can be an amazing person with amazing abilities, but people nowadays, they want, like, they're like the doubting Thomases. They want to stick their finger in the hole of Jesus Christ's hand, where the stake was, because they want to have some type of actual proof that this really existed and this really happened. And that's just the sad thing. I just wanted to point out a philosophical thing on this, with the reality of clients nowadays.
Well, I mean, there's a few things here that we've talked about, and we all have our own opinions. I do disagree on a few points, or have kind of a middle ground on a few things. I do understand that you want to have different things covering the same area to have that confirmation of something else being there, right, to gather your data. But I also know that if you have too many things, you're asking for too many variables that are uncontrollable, right? You're asking for too many devices to malfunction, batteries to be low, interference to come from other areas. So, it's all in how you conduct the experiments, right?
Sure.
So too much can be too much, too little cannot be enough. And, repeatability, you should be able to repeat it at least once. And if you can repeat it at least once, or something very, very similar, right, then that's a whole lot more credibility right there to what you're doing.
Oh, yeah, right? For sure.
So there's that. And, as far as the residentials go, in what I've experienced, the shows and everything, they've brought a lot of people thinking everything's the D word, and everything's the worst case scenario, and but there are a lot of people, not a lot, there are a few people that are having serious issues. Mm-hmm. And from the ones that I've worked with, the ones that have talked to me, they don't give a crap if you've got an EMF detector. They don't care if you've got 400 cameras. They want help. And if you are capable of doing it without help and you can explain it to them, there's that's why they call them evidentiary mediums, right? You can provide evidence of what's going on through what you know to confirm for them that what they're experiencing is real, right? You don't need a device when you tell them what that plate looked like that was flying at their head when you've never seen it before. Or, explain or draw the shoe that their grandmother wore, and she's the one that's in the house constantly moving the shoes. So there's different ways, and that's where, approaching residentials from a completely different standpoint than any other investigation is so crucial. And it really depends on your client, on the situation, on what's going on in the home, on their goals, what they want for it. There's plenty out there that are like, hey, I just want to claim that I've got a haunted house. I want 800 teams to come in here. I want them to provide all the documentation and proof rather than setting up their own freaking cameras and buying their little digital recorders and doing it themselves. They just want, the fame and be on TV or be on podcasts, whatever. But there are truly people who need help.
Yeah.
And they don't care. They honestly don't care. And they still exist.
Well, I agree, and I think they're out there, and I think the best thing you said was in that towards that is that, yeah, you need to know your clients. And I think that goes back to even that scientific approach where you observe and you ask a lot of questions. You kind of get to know your client before you even show up to investigate the house,
Yeah.
And so once you get to know your clients enough, you kind of know, like, okay, they seem like they might be in this for the attention. Sometimes they genuinely have panic, fear, maybe even like post or PTSD type stuff, So yeah, like I would 100% agree with you, Jen, that yes, knowing your clients can also determine the style of investigation or the level that you might need. And it depends. And like if you don't have that choice and you are by yourself and you have those skills and abilities and you can help people, then that's great. People will accept that. It's just the culture in general. Like we're just in that everybody wants proof nowadays, at least. And when I say everybody, like I said, I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of people want proof nowadays, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, and like Andrea's in here, and I only share this because not only has Andrea given me permission to share it, but she repeatedly shares it publicly all the time, very loudly. I actually met her as a residential client. She reached out for help, and I've worked with her for, gosh, it's going on like a year and a half now. Amazing family, and little Jasmine, of course. But and as she's commented on there, or they say, I hate my mirror in a bathroom turns out to be the pattern to make a funhouse effect. Yeah, no, I was fully prepared to go handle what I thought was in her bathroom based off what she explained, and I was like, you know what, it could be something else, that's fine, but I'm gonna go prepared anyway because she was a few hours away. And sure enough, we got there, and all I wanted to do was throw up from the funhouse effect from the wallpaper that was on the walls in the bathroom. And I was like, girl, just cover the wallpaper. Fair enough. But yeah, so that was quite the ride. But, I think the first time when I went out to her house, we did a walkthrough, and I used both equipment and myself. But I think the very first thing we did in there was we did an EMF sweep. And we found some very, very dangerous levels. And it did explain some of what they were experiencing, but it didn't explain a lot of what was going on. And it was done on her property before she was even here.
Right. And you bring up a great point. And that's something that I think we will definitely have to follow up maybe next week with, is doing a show on investigation techniques and methods, because I don't think there's always just a one way, right? And I think that utilizing the tools correctly, Like in your case, it's like, yeah, could you go in there just your ability? Sure. But the great thing about some of the tools like EMF meter is that it's not just a ghost indicator, okay? It has a function, okay? It can help to track down some craziness that could explain some things, okay? Which I'm not going to get into some, like, we'll save it for next week. But
Also a good topic for Sean, too.
right. Right. And so I think that hopefully next week we'll have some, the council will expand again next week, and we'll see who all makes it. Like I said, we're trying to keep quite a few of us to show up here, at least 3 of us minimally. And then we're trying to always have some people coming in, and we're going to try to run anywhere from 3 to 5 of us every week. So guys, we're going to wrap everything up. Unless you guys do you have any other quick points you want to throw in there, Jen, Stacy?
I think with everything, there's a balance, between being restrictive in what you use and how you use it, but also being open enough to consider the other possibilities. I think you have to find the balance, just like everything.
Yeah, well said. All right, guys. Yeah, Kitty Cat, you caught the end, but that's okay. You can watch the replay and then just make it next week. Andrea
and set a timer.
Andrea was on time. So, but no, it's good to see you, Kitty Cat. And everybody else that showed up, thank you for watching. And for those of you watching on a replay, guys, don't forget to click like. It really helps, even if you don't share it, but just even clicking like, leaving comments, all that helps to engage and gets us out there in the algorithm.
And if you click on the notification bell, it will actually alert you when the show starts. So
yes, hit that notification bell. Good call, Stacy. All right, guys, we will see you next week, where we will resume probably this conversation in a much deeper dive into paranormal investigation methods, techniques. We'll give you some pointers. We'll get into some good, juicy stuff as well, guys. All right. You all take it easy. We'll see you next week.
Peace.